Audit and pausing.
Yeah. Kevin's got the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go back. That's not- She gonna do it. Huh?
That's all
You
done.
sound
Grace
good.
does have two.
Okay, so-
Other all done.
So. Say when,
You're on.
we're on the air,
Yep.
okay. I'll call this meeting to order. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Directors of the Bolinas Community Public Utility District. All directors are present. Today is April 17th, 2024. And on to community expression. Any members of the audience?
Do you have a voice recorder, Jack? You want to do, usually Jennifer has the voice recorder, Georgia, do you know where that is? Are we not doing that anymore?
No, I don't think that's necessary because we are recording
Okay,
the
we're recording on
Zoom,
Okay,
so we have that audio recording.
Okay, sounds good. Sure. So resuming the community expression opportunity, any member of the audience that wants to address the board on matters which are not on the agenda and for which we can take no action. Will be entertained by a relatively brief discussion. Is there anyone in the audience with community expression?
I have a question, of course, always on my mind is the post office, but, I guess we haven't any updates beyond what the update, what is it,
Yeah.
Bolinas
As far as I know, we know nothing more than the
Okay.
general public. Yeah.
But, also, was wondering, well, I guess later on there'll be these other items. But I was wondering if, there's an update on when the deconstruction of the building will happen.
No, we have nothing on that. We'll get to it on the
Oh, it
agenda.
will be, I didn't see.
That's the ad hoc committee.
I see, yeah, sorry, okay.
Okay. Any other community expression items? None appearing. We'll move on to the manager's report on project updates.
All right, hello, everybody. So you may notice that I'm sharing a screen here, and as a former teacher, I like to teach via PowerPoint, so it's kind of my crutch. But hopefully you guys can give me feedback as to how all of this can improve. Just a slight disclaimer, I was away last week to go see the eclipse, which was amazing, but it was kind of terrible timing in terms of me getting thrown into presenting to you all. So I definitely feel like there's a lot of room for improvement on, just the whole presentation. And I, Belle and I have been discussing that in next week's agenda, we would really like to talk about sort of the board meeting very generally and get feedback from the board as to ways that, obviously this is a total point of transition, and get your feedback as to kind of what you want to see in the board. I would also, and even structurally, like, is even this the best place for us to meet, especially if I'm kind of doing a more sort of traditional presentation with digital formats. So anyway, that's kind of a preview for the future, but without further ado, I'm gonna present here just an overview, and bear with me that the order that this general manager's report, Jennifer prepared the agenda while I was away, and so I just wanted to restructure some things, and some things that aren't on here are in what I'll be talking about. So I just wanted to quickly, for you and the public, just quickly go over what I'll be talking about. So I'll go over the water supply. You guys are obviously used to that at this point. I'll go over the ground wells project. I'll go over the Aqua JPIA risk assessment and commitment to excellence program. I'll go over the bike path. I will go over the Alliance of Coastal Marin Villages. I will have an operations update, and there'll be 3 items on there, including our operations and maintenance of the solar arrays, federal regulation around PFAS contaminants, and the smart water meter assessment project that you guys asked me to report on last time. Okay, so quickly, the BCPUD's water supply memo. I'm just gonna take a moment here to just remind you all. So basically what happened previously is that Rob Gailey, our consulting hydrologist, had prepared an Excel doc that allows us to track all of our water supply and also use that data to project, right? And he had been preparing that data and then sharing it with Jennifer. And so she then would formally present on the data. So the idea was that I'm obviously a little like, pretty comfortable with Excel, but and that the Excel doc that Rob prepared is really, he spent quite a bit of time making it user friendly. And so that's one of the things that I spent time with. There was a little bit of a learning curve, but I think it all went fine. I still have some, after having gone through the entire process, I definitely need to return and have a conversation with Rob and just make sure, I'm doing things correctly. But he was extremely helpful in that process. So just want to thank him. And so this is, obviously what you guys are familiar with at this point, and this is the rainfall. So we have the rainfall progress, and as of March, one other thing to just remind you guys about. So there was this whole weird thing where we were really presenting almost up to the point of the meeting. And so Jennifer was often presenting in this kind of, between months format where it would be January 15th to February 15th. And so I'm not going to do that anymore. And I'm going to instead do it on the monthly basis. That gives me a little bit more time to not just be doing this last minute before presenting. And obviously if we got to into the point where we were like in a drought and we need very acute data, we can obviously modify that. Just to let you know, that's kind of, we've transitioned over to that. So as of the end of March 2024, the district had received 32.22 inches of rain since July 1st, 2023. That, as you were familiar, is the rain year. So from July 1 to June 30, which is slightly above the average of 29.17 inches for that time of year. So just to remind you guys, this is basically a cumulative plot where essentially we're looking at how much rain do we have by this point here. And then we're looking at averages and maximum historic data. Okay, and then this is also just, kind of a similar description, but here we're looking at the historic rainfall and total annual at this point in time. Let me make sure I'm not sure if I'm getting this completely right here. But basically, it's hard to see because we're not like zoomed in on this point, but I believe that this is still our data at this point in time. And the annual, and basically this number as we add to it, it's going to climb and be more reflective of the actual rainfall year. Okay, and then the other thing is just to point out that we have this graph where we project, right, using the rainfall progression analysis. And currently we're at a point where only 32% of years in our historical record have had more rain at this point in March than this year. Okay, and I'm describing this in slightly different text than Jennifer has traditionally described it. So hopefully you guys are following along, but definitely look for your feedback there. And using this progression correlation analysis, we are projecting that we'll have 35 inches by the end of the year. Obviously, that's a total projection. We have no idea, but this is basically looking and using historical data and kind of looking at this point in time, in most years, by the time we have this much rain, how much rain do we end up having by the end of the year? Okay, and then we have our water production consumption numbers. In March, water production in the district averaged 57,006 gallons per day. The last reporting period production averaged 53,655 gallons per day. So this is a little weird. I didn't put it in there, but just to let you know, there was that last reporting period is not the previous month. It's kind of this weird thing where we didn't fully catch up in March and stuff. So, but going forward, basically, the way I plan to do this is you all talk about the previous month and this month. But there's just kind of this anomaly as we transition right now. The reason for the increase at the water treatment was that the water treatment plant was off for 18 days. Jennifer reported to you this about this last time, but basically there were only 6 days it was off for this month, and last month being very stormy, the plant could not be run. Okay, and then water consumption in March averaged 58,482 gallons per day. That's approximately 100 gallons per day per connection. And last reporting period consumption averaged 55 gallons per day, and approximately 95 gallons per day per connection. And then you can obviously see that there's a minor shortfall between consumption and production, but basically that's able to be met by the stores we have in the tanks. Okay, and then this is basically, you're familiar with this. This is essentially looking at our total reserves in the reservoirs. And so, you know, because everything's flowing over, there's not much to report here. And then kind of similarly in terms of our projections around modeling the creek flows, it's not really very kind of useful to do it right now when the dam is overflowing. But just to let you know, obviously that's an indication that creek flows are really robust right now. And that's basically it. Okay, so moving on to our ground wells project. Again, there's not much to report here from last time, but just to remind you that essentially one of the things we were really working on these last couple of weeks was getting together our response to the coastal permit applications from the county planner. So basically they had identified incompleteness items, we're addressing those. None of them were, you know, like untenable, and basically a big portion of it was getting Rob Gailey to prepare a hydrological report. So we're submitting that on Friday, which is very exciting, and we're optimistic that everything should go well, but obviously I'll have a lot more to report next meeting, and hopefully it's good news. So that brings me to the Aqua JPIA risk assessment and commitment to excellence program. So this is a risk control advisor from Aqua JPIA, our insurance provider, met with BCPUD on March 21st, 2024. We had an all staff meeting over at the firehouse, and we're you know, led through a defensive driver training. It was really fun, and the whole Stinson staff was there as well, which was a really nice opportunity for me to meet a lot of folks, and so that was nice. And then also in that, you know, assessment, the risk control advisor also did a tour with Stu, and that report is in the materials where you can see where he's, you know, pointing out some things that need to be fixed, but relatively minor. And then the other thing is just sort of this kind of thing that we don't have to do, but obviously we should, because it's just signing a paper. But we need to have all board members and myself sign the commitment to excellence. And this is basically best practices approach to high frequency, high severity loss drivers for insured pool. So you'll see that in the materials. And I don't know if it's appropriate right now to have you guys all sign it or after the meeting, but I suggest we can wait till the end of the meeting. Just somebody remind me if I start to forget. Okay, any questions? Obviously interrupt me anytime to ask questions.
You're doing good so far.
Yeah.
Okay.
Did you have a question?
Grace, do you have a question?
I just really briefly, in that Aqua JPIA report, I thought the report was great. And he mentioned that there's a grant to maybe buy a mower. Did I read that correctly?
Yeah, sorry, the $10,000.
Yeah, that he was suggesting that we apply for the grant.
Yeah, so I think that my kind of memory of this whole thing, because when I was reading this, it was slightly different than I remembered him talking about it in person, so I can definitely check in with him. But my understanding is that these are almost, they are like, grants in that you're not guaranteed funding, but you submit and then they kind of highlight a specific area of high risk for a year. So my memory was that he talked about that it was like related to ergonomic,
Yeah.
like decreased risk, so if you could say, let's say there was some sort of manual job that a district was doing. And one of the things that we talked about was actually the Azola and, kind of, I think Jennifer's reported to you guys on the idea that the operators have of kind of using the existing drainage system to try to like scoop up the Azola. Just to recognize, like, I mean, he didn't say this explicitly, but I kind of was reading between the lines. I think the things that are most sort of competitive in that process are going to be things that are really widespread among all water districts, because you can imagine what they're looking for is like somebody has invented this cool thing and it's just really, then they can kind of disseminate that to all of the pool and be like, hey, everybody should be doing this. So one of the examples he used was some water district had developed like effectively a table so that instead of when you were like working on a hydrant and like bending over, that it was, some apparatus that allowed you to work at, kind of eye level and whatever. So we haven't really discussed it further to be like, hey, what would this look like? What are potential ideas? I think that this would, to my mind, it should be really driven by the operators because they're going to have such a better practical understanding of what they're actually contending with in the field.
Yeah,
Mhm.
good. Yeah, the report mentions a hitch mounted tow behind lawnmower.
Yes,
rather than-
yeah, and I think that is potentially something that he discussed with Stu while he was in the field. Because I don't remember that in detail, but I may also just be.
That's,
memory.
I was just, any money out there.
Yes, yeah, no, I definitely think
Money's
it's.
good.
And it would save a bunch of time for the operators probably to,
Yeah,
like doing it by hand.
but I agree with you that if Stu discussed it with him and has a better idea of A, what we might actually get the grant for, and B, what they actually need, that's fabulous. I was just following up on that. Thank you.
Mhm. Okay, so that is that item, so I'm gonna move ahead here. So yeah, so the bike path, I think the last time we reported, we were sort of in the same kind of holding pattern where we are waiting to confer with the county about whether we are gonna need coastal permitting. And those conversations have moved ahead in that, we're in the process of scheduling those meetings, but we haven't been able to actually have the discussion where I would be able to tell you something more useful than what I'm telling you now. So anyway, yeah, that's going forward, and we're still kind of, optimistic that what we were originally obviously under the impression that it would not require new coastal permitting, and that we would be under this, the repair and maintenance of the existing,
Is the town still using the bike path in the eucalyptus grove at the moment? Or is it?
I do not think so. My understanding, like I haven't explicitly asked anyone if, they've noticed that, but last I'd heard operators were saying, they occasionally see somebody and let them know that it's not open, but. Okay, and then just to report on the Alliance of Coastal Marin Villages, and anybody who's not aware, this is basically an alliance of coastal marine villages. We had our quarterly meeting with Supervisor Rodoni in Point Reyes Station at the county building there. Sarah Jones, who is director of Marin County's Community Development Agency, was also in attendance. And so we really steered the conversation around permitting and things that were relevant, and kind of, trying to maximize our time with her and get her feedback. And I think a point of emphasis was just to make sure that community plans are being carefully considered during the permitting process. just to be clear, I mean, Jennifer and I were in attendance. We were not like super involved in the discussion. We were kind of, there were a lot of meetings leading up to this or not a lot, but several, kind of email exchanges and sort of getting our agenda and all of us on the same page. But then while we were actually there, I primarily was listening to the other members and their interactions with both Rodoni and Sarah Jones. And then the other thing that we really brought to their attention was this was a discussion around sea level rise. And essentially there is this, this was again led by other members, but they've pointed out that there are some I'm just going to read this. Okay, members are concerned that the study appears to be, sorry, no, that's not where I wanted to start reading. Want to make sure that West Marin and coastal communities are not ignored in the recently approved study for countywide governance structure to respond to sea level rise. Effectively, the county has paid consultants to do this broad study on a county-wide approach. But, to be totally candid, I have not looked at that report carefully, and that's kind of the nice thing about being in this Alliance of Coastal Marin Villages. There's a lot of concerned citizenry there, and they bring things to your attention. And effectively, people that have looked at the report are pretty concerned that it's really bay focused and it's not coastally focused. And so, that was kind of bringing it to their attention. And to be fair, I don't think that they necessarily, that they have only, the study has not been performed yet. They have just brought on and accepted the proposal. But my understanding is people that looked over that proposal are a little concerned that there's not as much focus, which at some level makes sense. There's a huge population over there that is not here. But obviously there's all kinds of people out here and infrastructure, and we can't just be ignored in that whole process.
And so that's really West Marin, when you're saying, that it's focused on the Bay Area, but we're feeling like West Marin's being excluded or even further up the coast.
Well, this is this is, I guess it depends on what you call West Marin. This is a coastal Marin villages, but to be clear, there's people in Point Reyes. So some of the conversations that people were talking about is like, it's not just coastal. We need to make sure we're looking at Tamales Bay, right? There's going to be different, and it's really going to vary on where you are. And there's going to be a lot of nuance there. A lot of what we were also talking about, and that they were totally, they were reiterating, like, we're not going to be ignored, and Highway 1 is a major corridor. And so, there's definitely going to be investigation and investments out here. But, part of the thing that they're talking about, at least what the county representatives were saying is that we're basically way less competitive in Marin than other counties that have really formed this concerted county-wide approach to like going after dollars at the state level and federal level. And so it's just like, everybody, I think it's kind of sad, but obviously this is, everybody's vying for the same dollars. And it's just like, I think that from the county's perspective is like, how do we coordinate this? How do we make ourselves competitive?
Yeah.
And then from our perspective, the coastal perspective and really rural perspective, I think that's the real concern, right? Is that if they do things based on, loss assessment and risk assessment, then, those kinds of analyses don't prioritize us out here. And so it's just kind of, making sure. Anyway, it's obviously super complicated.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I'm curious about those meetings. Are those meetings of just administrators and management people, or are they open to the public, or who shows up at those meetings?
They are not open to the public. I honestly don't fully understand the genesis, but just to let you know, it's like local public utility district representatives, and then also some, kind of concerned, and vocal citizens, like they don't have necessarily a local agency that they're representing. And yeah, I mean, I can look into it.
I'm just was curious because it's on the agenda every month and I've never really understood what the organization of those communities is representing, who they're representing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really know, except that in 2017 it formed and it was, I can't remember what the sort of impetus was for it, but there was something specific. I think it was like around tourism or something like that, something where, you know, a lot of coastal villages were contending with a specific issue, and then people came together and are like, well, we should really, you know, join our efforts and be kind of a stronger voice. So
Is it primarily now about sea level rise or about a variety?
it's all kinds of things. I mean, the one thing to point out is that, you know, there's a lot of different disparate voices represented in that group, as you can imagine, because they're just sort of random individuals representing. And so we really don't pursue things unless there is sort of a consensus. We're kind of trying to speak as a voice. And so as an example, like there was not a total overlapping of how to approach like short-term rentals and stuff like that, because there were, you know, Dillon Beach and Stints, you know, Seadrift represented in that group. And so that's not something that we really, you know, move toward. So anyways, just to kind of.
All right, why don't you continue?
Yep. Okay, so on the operations update, this I would almost say, I'm just giving a brief update, and I was almost considering discarding it because basically we set up a meeting and spoke to the owner of Solar Technologies on March 27th. This was Jennifer and I, and essentially it seemed really promising, and we're hoping to get a quote back from him with a proposal, but we that hasn't happened yet. So I'm, you know, hoping, but this is something that Jennifer has warned me has happened before. And so, you know, I'm definitely going to keep pursuing it, but anyway. And then just quickly, you'll notice that in your materials, there's a bunch of data results from the PFAS testing. And just, I'm sure that you all understand this, but in the interest of keeping the public informed too, on April 10th, 2024, Environmental Protection Agency set maximum contaminant levels, referred to as MCLs, allowed in drinking water per for 6 per and poly, I'm not going to even say that, but PFAs, these are like the forever plastic chemicals, right? Last year, BCPUD was randomly selected by the EPA to participate in a nationwide testing program. Sampling occurred quarterly from the West Tank. So this is our treated water, but right off the gate, you know, in March, June, September, and December. So what is in your pockets is, or, you know, on the material, on the share drive is all of that test, and those tests are complete because now December has been collected and reported. And so as has been reported to you all along in these quarterly meetings, there's no detection of PFASs in our water, which is great news because what you're hearing a lot about is that there's really not enough money to actually address these pollutants. And so you're, you know, this is kind of classic regulation where you're being told to do something, but without actually the means to address it. And just like incurring more and more costs around regulation. So there is actually a helpful kind of summary from our insurers, the Aqua JPIA. They wrote some stuff around sort of summarizing how water districts are going to or not going to be able to contend with this. But fortunately for us, that it doesn't look like we're gonna have to deal with it.
But we monitor probably. And
Yes.
continue to test, right?
We're gonna have to continue to test that. Yeah, that's I mean, actually, I don't know, and I don't know what that's gonna look like, and I don't know how this pilot testing program might factor into that, and maybe, you know, I have no idea. But my guess is, yes, it would just be part of our testing program going forward.
So they are filterable, but it's just incredibly expensive to do so.
I don't know. I haven't looked into it. I can, I mean, I'm kind of glad that I don't have to know a ton about it right now.
Right now.
But yeah, I'm not sure.
Okay.
I did actually, yeah. Anyway, no, I'm not gonna even talk about that. So, but you will notice that lithium is a hit in our testing results. The problem is, I'm just gonna read this just for the public. Lithium has been detected, as far as I understand, in all of the quarters where you guys have heard results. Lithium is a naturally occurring metal in Earth's crust and is used commercially, especially in electric car batteries. There are no MCL yet set for lithium. So even to define what is, a hit is not even, we don't have a baseline yet. So, I mean, I haven't looked into this a lot to know whether, oh yes, very likely, like ours is, well above average or in water systems, but it's a common, contaminant. And we don't, my sense right now is that there's no way to interpret the levels that we're seeing in our water. But just to point out that, it's on a list of, it is on EPA's 5th contaminant candidate list, which is a list of contaminants not currently subject to any regulation, but which may require future regulation under the Safe Drinking Water Act. So obviously, and my understanding, I mean, again, I haven't had an opportunity to talk to Jennifer about this in great detail. My understanding that is that we will have to report in our consumer water report around the lithium, but it won't have, just as I'm talking to you about it here, it's not going to be just the word I'm looking for, something that's bad.
A regulated constituent?
No, but like, when you thanks, Rob, was that Rob from the? No, not a regulated constituent, but just a
Contaminant.
yeah, no, but like when you're like you've done something bad in terms of your regulation. Anyway.
A violation.
A violation, that's the word I was looking for. Of course, the librarian. Yeah.
Every once in a while I can come up with.
Yeah, the violation. So anyway, but we still will be reporting on it. Okay, so this brings me to the smart water meter assessment project. And just to let you know, this is quite long, and I'm sorry, I'm really wanting to not have the manager report take up so much time, but I kind of broke this down, and what I'm going to talk about tonight is very general. I'm still looking into things, and as we go forward, I can continue to report on this. But I just wanted to, as I started to think about this more deeply, and in terms of our conversation last time, I think that there were some kind of just basic fundamentals that we're not all aware of, at least I wasn't, and I thought it would be useful to have a very kind of high level discussion tonight, and not try to do everything at once. Okay, so just in very gross detail, what are the foreseeable benefits of smart water meters? So more efficient reading of meters in the field, so you have less staff time potentially, a safer working environment for operators, and that they don't have to be going into people's yards and contending with dogs, etc. You have more efficient data entry and analysis. So again, we're talking about potential savings on staff time. And it enables more frequent readings of meters, which has the potential to catch leaks sooner and more easily, mitigate billing disputes between customers and districts, enable the district to collect more granular real-time consumption data. And this is especially useful during droughts and ensuring conservation efforts. And enable the district to conduct monthly monitoring. Monthly data would align better with conventional automated monthly billing systems and annual and monthly regulatory reports that are really geared to this month timeline. So note that there is value in manual reading of water meters. I know that Jennifer has talked about this to you guys before, but this is primarily framed within the context of having like boots on the ground and going in and, you know, seeing things that you wouldn't otherwise see. And also physically interacting with the meters, meaning that, you know, there's not a bunch of bushes growing over them and other stuff that can happen when you're just kind of like leaving them be. Okay, so obviously that's very general when we're just thinking about, you know, what is the benefit? So now I just wanted to talk about how, you know, a part of this is I'm new to the district. And so some of it is just a learning curve, but I think it's also probably helpful to explain to you and the public, or remind you probably. So what do manual readings entail and how much do they cost? So, and I'll thank Andrew for this because he really reached out to Jennifer and I really used that email exchange that you guys had. So you'll probably recognize some of this. But operators read a third of the district's 587 meters at the beginning of each month. So this is our quarterly system. And it takes 2 operators around 5 hours to read and then reread this subset of 200 meters, totaling about 10 hours per month, right? So right at the beginning of the month, they do what is called like an area, and the areas are broken up into thirds. And essentially there's, you know, 10 hours if you combine all the effort. It takes additional time, around 6 hours, for this data to be entered manually into our billing system and for monthly bills to be mailed out, et cetera. So there's an interface between obviously the meter reading and the billing system. And kind of when you compile all of that, and that's Belle, who is, you know, doing this work of reading, you know, written down meter numbers and then typing them into our billing system. This is a total of 16 hours at a cost of totaling everybody combined, around $560 if you kind of guess a blended rate of $35 an hour. Okay, a very conservative high estimate for how much it costs in hourly wages would be that these 200 meter reads cost about $1,000 a month. Okay. So again, this is, you obviously see the numbers that we're actually looking at are 560. We're totally inflating that to be like, what is the sort of worst case scenario around how much we spend? And I would say that, you know, I didn't talk about it here, but I alluded to it in the previous slide. Some of this is all around, okay, well, we also use these, you know, what becomes our consumption numbers. We use it for all kinds of regulatory reporting, et cetera, right? So, you know, it's hard to really estimate how the kind of efficiencies that you would gain from meter reading would then play into all of the different ways that we use that data. So
Can you go back? What do you mean read and reread the meters? So
yeah, so
you
what
read them twice?
Yeah, so what happens often is, you know, they're writing down a number, they come back to Belle inputs it, she figures out, and she's like, this number doesn't make sense. So she sends them back out into the field and it's like, no, that number does make sense. Oh, that person has a leak.
Right.
Then it starts a whole process, right? So that's like,
Okay.
you know, so and sometimes, oh, I thought this 6 was a 6, but really it was, I don't know what number looks like a 6.
Five.
A 9.
And do you have a sense of what that percentage is that they had to go back?
No, just in a kind of hourly sense. I think that it was, I mean, I kind of pushed it all together here, but my memory is that basically they said like, oh, it's 4 hours and then another hour in rereads. And from Belle's perspective, it was like 4 hours and another 2 hours where she's dealing with that. So, you know, I mean, as a percentage, it's like a big fraction.
Mhm.
Okay. But again, these are all, you know, kind of coarse estimates of people being like, I think you know. Okay, and so what data do manual reads generate? So individual customers only get reads every 3 months. This is the quarterly system, and it's staggered it's staggered. So the important thing to realize about that, like for me personally, I look at that data and it would be like, even if we were getting it quarterly, it would be so much easier if everybody was getting read in January, because then you're dealing with this staggered data that's just like a kind of mess to deal with. And you have, you know, when you're then doing these reports, for your monthly, it's all projections based on, it's kind of a mess. Okay, the billing system is where we currently track this. And this is what I was pointing out. Region 1 customers are in January, Region 2 in February, Region 3 in March. and then you repeat the cycle, and then by the end of it, right, you have your quarterly readings. The billing system is where we currently track this individual customer consumption. We estimate overall consumption in the district from these individual staggered data. Based on these reads, we bill customers quarterly, and again, in this staggered manner where, you know, people that had their meters read in January, they're getting their bills a month before the people that got theirs read in February. So at some level, because we have a manual billing system too, that's actually better because it makes it more manageable. We're not having to send out a million bills at once. But you can imagine if we moved over to an automated billing system, like, I mean, it's complicated. Anyways, we
I mean,
estimate,
online, maybe billing system, I don't know, or,
what's that?
I mean, something, because it's coming out through the mail, right?
Yes, yes, and definitely, so that's like a whole other thing that I didn't
Yeah.
really talk about here, right? Is like, we could still have manual meter readings and move on to an online billing system.
Yeah.
However, some of that software might be also kind of herky-jerky because of this quarterly staggered system that we have. I don't know. It's definitely something that I want to look into, and Belle and Jennifer have told me they have looked into, and you know, there's a lot of value in it, and it's not impossible, but I just foresee that once you kind of start actually implementing it, there are issues with how we do things that make that kind of system difficult to adopt. So currently in our billing system, this data overwrites every 16 reads, i.e. we maintain individual customer data for the last 4 years in our billing system. And note, we have paper copies of like people's bills. I know that this is something that you as a board have talked about, so I was just kind of pointing out, how long does the data sit there? We don't collect that data. We don't have another, it's not like we, you know, download the billing data every whatever. It literally is overwriting. However, we are sending out paper kind of corresponding data, but it means that that data is a mess to deal with, right? After 4 years. Okay, so what are the drawbacks due to the way we currently collect data? It's inefficient and less safe for meter reading. It's inefficient data entry analysis and billing. An ongoing leak could last up to 3 months before the district notices and notifies the customer. If there's any dispute around water usage, there's no way to verify the nature of the usage within the last 3 months. The staggered manner that we collect data make alignment with monthly billing system and annual monthly consumption reporting complicated and inefficient. So again, just to like caveat, this is just like me thinking about stuff. And so, you know, as I investigate this more and talk to more people, like likely I would understand, oh yeah, this is another benefit to doing it manually or vice versa. Anyway. So a big picture, what are our options when we think about trying to mitigate those problems that I just described? So you guys have talked about Flume devices. These are customer-owned hardware and software that enables the customer to monitor their usage. There's AMR systems, which are automated meter reading. And then there's AMI systems, which stands for Advanced Metering Infrastructure. So really briefly, the basics of Flume devices. These are customer-owned the device and the data. This data cannot be used to replace official meter reads. It's really important because the device is not a meter. It's actually just measuring flow. And I don't know a ton about how that happens because my understanding is that they model your usage based on that flow, but it's not an actual accurate meter reading. And that a lot of it is around like sort of predictive software that says like, oh, this looks like a washing machine running. And, you know, they can tell you how you're using water based on the sort of nature of the flow. This software is reportedly well designed and can lead to pronounced changes in consumption behavior, especially during droughts, and allows near instantaneous detection of leaks by the customer. So what issues would, you know, those issues that I pointed out, and just like what you'll see is I'm always coming back to this list of issues and kind of thinking like, well, what would have, if we had a flume, if every person in our district had a flume device, what would this solve? So it doesn't lead to more efficient meter reading, because as I said, you don't actually use it for meter reading. And the inefficiencies around data entry analysis are still there, and all of the billing doesn't help us as a district really at all. What it does help with is an ongoing leak could last up to 3 months before the district notices and notifies the customer. You basically, assuming that the customer is paying attention to it, then they're noticing leaks right away. And if there's any dispute around water usage, there is a way to verify it. Although, of course, the customer is holding that data, so it's not really super useful to us. And the staggered manner around collecting data, none of that really helps because it's not helping us. Okay, so this is a flume device in action. This is basically you attaching the flume to your meter. This is, the kind of mobile report you get. And in investigating this, I came across that Inverness, and maybe you guys have already had reports on this, but Inverness Public Utility District has a flume program, and reportedly this program allows the customers to purchase devices at a substantially discounted price, and the district is allowed to view the customer data. So I just today got information back that from having interacted with the former general manager over there, who actually got this program up and running. It was a ton of useful information, but again, in the interest of not like completely overwhelming us tonight, I'll save that information for a later time. But just to let you know, it was super helpful. Okay, so then that brings us to these AMR systems. So this again is the automated meter reading, and device is owned by the district. There's a recorder and a transmitter directly installed on the meter. In practical terms, AMR usually refers to the fact that an operator needs to collect the data via a mobile receiving unit. And the data will only be collected when an operator goes into the field and actively downloads the data to a mobile data collector. Usually they do this through a walk-by or a drive-by. Okay, so I think this is a really key point, especially in terms of how we were discussing it last time. When you have these AMR systems, you still, even if the data is being collected out there, like it's like the meter has all of that data, but until you go and actually download it, you as a district don't see that data. So the important point here is that they could have a leak. If we go and collect data as we are right now, every quarter, that person still has a leak for 3 months. The nice thing is you can look back retrospectively at the data and be like, oh, that's when your leak started, right? And then you can have discussions, that whole issue that I, just to bring us to this kind of, what does an AMR system help us with? Well, it pretty much, depending on how frequently you go out there and collect it, it can help with mitigate all of those issues, right? But it's all dependent on how frequently you do this. So
And when you say a drive-by, what does that mean?
it's literally, and actually, maybe I'll go to
Okay.
this one because it's
Yeah.
is sort of like, how do we actually think about this? So I don't know to what extent the board was aware that staff had really pursued this AMR system, but effectively I think that they talked to several companies, and some of the information that I've been given was related to their conversations with this company called Neptune Technology Group. And this is kind of one of the big players out there in terms of automated meter reading. And my understanding is that the chief operator, Stu, had went around and was basically wined and dined. No, I'm just kidding. But went around and got a sense of how the technology works and felt that it was really promising. So this device here, which is basically, can you see that? Can you see it on there?
Yeah.
That's the recorder. This is obviously the smart meter that's sitting on your actual meter. And then this is, you as the operator are seeing this interface where effectively, you're essentially telling it, hey, download this data, download that data, download that data. You can see all of the meters that it's kind of detecting in the field. And so in the drive, my understanding is in the drive-by, you literally, so there's like different forms of how you can do it. There's basically like a belt clip where somebody can be walking around. And let's say, this is kind of my sort of gross practical understanding of how this works. You would have you'd have this larger device in your truck, say, and you're driving, and maybe you have problematic homes where you need to get like actually closer to the meter, and you have a belt clip, and then you like walk in and get within the region that you're actually able to collect that data as well. So it's probably in practical terms, even though you're like buying the drive-by kind of system, you end up having to do some kind of hybrid of, getting close enough. So when the quotes that we looked at related to this were in the $200,000 range. And so that's a big chunk of change. And one of the things that they had, and that I actually have the materials for, is around when they were discussing, hey, let's retrofit our Badger meters with these smart meters because that's possible. And then the idea would be that you'd have some cost savings. I think what happened is when they saw how expensive it was, and then they went back out to them and they're like, well, how much would it cost to actually change it out? I don't have that information, but my guess looking at the quote was that you're looking at like a $20,000 difference. And maybe that's just their like kind of scheme. And I don't know if you shop around and look at a bunch of other people, if retrofitting Badger meters is like a more economical way to go. But there was sort of an understanding that many of our meters, if not like all of them, are kind of at the end of their lifespan anyway, and that we're going to have to change these out. And if we change them out, then why would we be retrofitting stuff and not be getting the whole thing changed out? Okay, anyways, I will be collecting more information on all of this to report back to you.
If you don't know it, one thing that I would love if you could research is how long are they accurate for? Like, do they degrade or do they lose their sensitivity over years? Or are they just like, this is how much is
I think that, yeah, you mean as far as the smart meter?
as far as the AMRs, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my sense is that they last as long as the meter lasts anyways, that you're having to, anyway, but
Okay.
I'll definitely look into it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? And then finally, there's the AMI system, which again is the advanced metering infrastructure. And the data is collected remotely and is downloaded to a data collector automatically in a periodic fashion. So when we think of smart meters, I think this is actually what we're thinking of, in that in practical terms, AMI refers to the fact that no operator needs to collect the data in the field. It's just being transmitted back to a server or to a cloud-based, repository. This means that you could have near instantaneous detection of leaks and feedback to customers around consumption habits, right? So it's kind of like doing the same thing that all of the Flume does, plus you're getting all of the advantages that we were talking about in terms of automated recording of data. There's different technologies that enable this remote automated reading of meters, and in rural settings, some apparently work better than others. And again, I'm not like gonna present like, oh, this is the best technology for us. But obviously that would be something we'd be pursuing. So what issues would an AMI system help fix? Basically, just coming back to that same slide, all of them pretty much. But just to note that, this is kind of like the perfect scenario. So one thing to point out is Stinson has an AMI system that I don't know exactly when they got theirs online. And this is, what their customer interface looks like. So it's similar to the Flume where you can see what was your consumption, like minute by minute, etc. You can get reports instantly that they're detecting, a leak, etc. Again, this is reportedly, in that I have not directly spoken to Stinson about this, but my sort of anecdotal information that I've gathered from our own staff is that leaks, I mean, I know that they have this customer interface, that I know. But the leaks are detected much more efficiently by customers and the district, and that consumption and revenue in Stinson is down because of it. And, but importantly, that nearly 20% of their meters are not readable through this automated process. And so they still, and I don't know what that then looks like if now they have, you know, effectively an AMR system instead of the AMI system where they're having to go and drive by those, or if it's like, no, I have to like, you know, lift up the tank and, or the, you know, the meter casing and look in there.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful to figure out what the conditions are for those 20% and how that might relate to our customers here in our district and what, try to predict what kind of problems we would have with that
Yeah,
system.
definitely. And I will be meeting with Stinson Water next week. I'm really excited to meet. As I said, I've met the staff, but that was more operators that were doing the driver's training. I haven't met the administrators yet. And so I'll have an opportunity to do that next week. And I'm really excited to talk to them about all of this. And then I'll be reporting back to you with more concrete information on how it's actually going over there.
How do they talk to each other?
So that's what I was alluding to in terms of that technology.
Got it.
I mean, they're like mesh networks and there's different ones that use cellular and like, and so I didn't want to necessarily get into the nitty gritty because I think, you know, at some level, it's already understood that some technologies work better in rural settings than others. And so, you know, I can kind of figure that out and sort of filter out what I present to you in terms of what is likely going to be most practical for us. But yeah, what's that?
Is it possible to use a flume with an AMR so that the, like?
Yeah, they're totally compatible.
They'll
So,
fit.
yeah, so if you look at it, well, it's showing it here, but my understanding is that they are. It's like, that's kind of Flume's thing is like, you can do it even if you're, you know, blah, blah, blah.
Okay.
But I don't know in practical terms, like depending on the size of the meter box, like it's kind of a big hunk of hardware. So
Right, I just got a flume, but I haven't installed it yet, but it would. Yeah,
yes.
that would be nice, because then you get the consumers.
Yeah, so I mean, in some ways, if you have something like this, the flume though becomes redundant.
If you have something like this, but if
Yes.
you have the AMR.
Yeah.
Well, so I didn't really go into that, but the AMR, yes, in terms of, because my understanding is with the AMR, they have user interfaces too.
Okay.
But the problem is if you're only downloading that data every month, that's what the customer is seeing, right? So
Right.
the flume would be an advantage over that because you would still be getting your like, oh, I'm detecting my instantaneous leaks, etc.
Yeah.
But you could still look at your consumption habits over the month and stuff like that. And that but again, like, you know, it's more detail than I want to go into here because I think there's costs associated with like, oh, do you also want the customer to be able to look at their data? And it's like, okay, then there's all of that software management and you can pay for that and whatever. But,
Okay, yeah, thank you.
okay, and then
Super helpful, Georgia.
finally, the next steps for smart water meters in BCPUD's long-term plan for capital improvement projects. So you may have noticed in looking at our capital improvement projects that this is not something we're pursuing next year. And it's not even something that we've called like, you know, tier 1. This is tier 2. And this is really, you know, I agree with it in that it's not, you know, we have a lot of needs, but it's also historic. It's not a decision I've made. It's a decision that, you know, is pre-existing my time here. And effectively, I will continue to think of this as tier 2 unless for some reason you guys tell me, no, this is really high priority and we need to move it up. But it wouldn't be something, I mean, as we're coming to the budget for next year, as the finance committee can attest to, it's not something we're like, let's do it, you know, obviously it's not happening in 24, 25. But like to your point, Kevin, when I was thinking about this, and again, this is with the caveat that I have like a ton on my plate. And as I pursue things, maybe I will discover that this isn't a realistic approach, but was to like pilot the AMR system in our most difficult regions and maybe our average region and our easy region and get like a sense of what does an AMR system look like here? How easy, you know, what is it?
Yeah.
But the one thing to point out is depending on the technology that you use because Neptune, the one that I was talking about and looking through their materials, one of the things that they really push is like, you don't have to do this all at once. The AMR system is exactly the same as the AMI system in terms of the, data collection. It's just how that data is being now transmitted to those other systems. And so basically you invest in the AMR system, and down the road, you can then basically transition that over to an AMI system.
Mm.
The issue though, I think for us is that how do you pilot an AMI system? It's really difficult because it's all dependent on these little hubs.
Yeah.
And unless you are, and my understanding is that it's basically troubleshooting at that point. Is like, if you're having something that's difficult, then you're putting like another kind of relay point and trying to improve the whole network. Anyway.
Well, and integrating it into the capital improvements project, or plan may be contingent on when you think the meters are going to be antiquated and need to be placed.
Totally, exactly. And I mean, I think that's a really important point is like, at some point, these meters will start to fail, right? And then our decision is made for us. Because as I was pointing out before, like the difference in cost between replacing a meter and then having it be automated, like compatible, or enabled. I mean, again, I haven't cost searched around, like this is
Yeah.
one example. So it's possible that the cost that I'm reporting here, we could replace our meters for a fraction of that cost. But anyway. And what is the other thing I wanted to? Yeah, so basically I plan to bring you updates, periodic. I'm not going to be like next month we're going to go into a deep dive. It kind of depends on how I collect information from, like I said, Stinson Water and others, and how quickly I can investigate it, because it's not super high priority for me at this moment. But obviously if you guys direct me otherwise, then I will kind of, move it up. Any other questions?
I mean, I had noticed that it was on the CIP for
Tier
2 years from now as a tier 2 project. So I was hoping to, and I don't know about the timing, how this all works with our budget discussions and, what's being approved tonight. But carving out some funds to do a trial, within the next year.
Mhm.
But it sounds like we just need more information. We don't even know if a trial is feasible.
Well, definitely for the AMR system, I think it's feasible.
But we don't
then-
even know if that's the road we want to go down. I mean-
Yeah, I mean, again, I think it just makes more sense to have this conversation when I have concrete,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah,
understanding of what our potential options are. One thing I did want to point out though is that we are in consultation with a sorry, I'm forgetting what the acronym is, but basically it's like a rural district, blah, blah, blah. And effectively it's an agency that helps you with funding, and it seems super promising. And essentially we've been like, sought out from them because of, our, I don't know, like essentially vulnerability around drought. And so we've had a preliminary meeting with this woman, and we're gonna have another meeting with her in like a month. And I think it's really important to point out that obviously if I find grant funding, like the reason that this is tier 2 is because of the cost and the benefits, right? But if the costs change and she's like, oh no, there's a lot of, grant funding around in drought districts for metering, automated metering, because it's, so effective at mitigating your leaks, then obviously I would come back to you and say, hey, we should move this up to tier 1, right? And really pursue some grant funding. Anyway, so that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. And yeah, again, I personally think that, there's a lot of advantages in trying to get us onto a monthly recording of data.
Mhm.
And so.
Yeah.
can you go back to your slide showing the costs of our existing system about operators reading the meters? Because I think there's an additional cost that we have right now when we have customers coming to us asking for relief on their bills. So we're making water, sending it to customers, and we've seen these, recently, customers are asking for up to 90% relief on their water bills. So that's basically revenue that we aren't getting. So I think that's a lost source of revenue that's that should be thought about with this kind of a system.
Yeah,
If we were able to detect these leaks, then it's water that we wouldn't be providing and losing out on,
Losing.
especially in a drought year where it becomes way more critical.
yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of this weird catch 22, like where I was talking about Stinson water, right? So actually your revenues go down when this happens, so it just, I mean, not that that's like what you're trying to pursue, like, obviously, but it's just important to factor that in. And one thing that, I think is just, I kind of just want to throw it out there. When Jennifer was talking about looking into moving over to this kind of system, one of the things that these companies also kind of tout is like meters tend to, as they decay, they tend to under read. And so that and if you look at any of the materials that all of these companies are promoting, it's all around like get accurate descriptions and increase your revenue because your meters are more accurately reading. I think that in reality, like at least on a practical level, that there's not a lot of benefit from that, or maybe it's just that it's really hard to tease that apart because you've so mitigated the leaks that any kind of revenue you gained from having more accurate measurements of the actual water usage or just that's like a drop in the bucket compared to now identifying leaks at a much higher, or much more efficient manner. Anyway.
Good, well, I think that if you just continue what you're doing and bring us as much hard data as you can, then at some point we're gonna have to pick a solution, I think.
And-
We're gonna have to go that way.
And I think Kirsten's point is really important, though. It's like I need to talk to the operators more about what is the lifespan on our meters, because that's gonna really dictate how urgent and whether this moves up to a tier 1 within the next couple of
That's
years.
true too, yeah. All right.
All right, so that is that.
Yeah, your manager's report?
I'm done.
Yeah.
Oh, am I? I think. Yeah, I'm done.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Georgia.
Yeah.
All right. We're gonna go on to item 5, limited water use permit application for One Brighton Avenue in Bolinas, which is the Calvary Presbyterian Church. Is there anyone in the Zoom that wants to address this application?
Hi, I'm Reverend Ellen Baxter, and I'm here also with one of our church elders, Ann Sands. I think the application that we submitted kind of speaks to all the points. It's hopefully a pretty simply understood request, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have about our project.
Okay, does this meter already have a conditional on it, Georgia?
No.
Does not, no.
No.
Okay. So normally we put a limit on it if we think that the project you're engaging in is gonna result in an increase in water use on the premises. So for instance, people add a bedroom or a second bathroom or something like that.
Right.
And go ahead.
Oh, right. No, we're really just upgrading existing property. This, just to be full disclosure, this house has been used in this capacity for more than 39 years. And what we're doing is trying to make it legal. And so if we can get your approval tonight, then our next step is to get a building permit so that we can do some upgrading. And our plan is once we've done the upgrades that we'd like to do, then we will offer it for 2 affordable housing units for West Marin.
Okay, but as you transition to another use like that, will it be projected to increase the amount of water being used, or is it?
No, we don't anticipate that at all. And that also comes from our builder, the person that we're working with.
Okay, let me go around and see what the other board members think. Kevin, I'll start with you. Do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't I don't see increased water use happening here, but on the other hand, we're sort of legalizing something that has been going on for a while, so I don't know, are we obligated to make them have an, I mean,
No,
I would like every property in Belize to be on an LWUP, don't get me wrong, but I don't know if it's appropriate in this case.
right, doesn't seem about, what do you think, Christian?
It doesn't seem appropriate to make it an LWAP, is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Yeah, because like she said, the use isn't changing. It's been used like this for 39 years, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
I
I
don't-
think this is the opportunity where somebody's coming for an application and it's, you know, we want to convert as many people to an
Yeah.
LWAP as possible,
Yeah.
so. You know, I appreciate them doing their due diligence, by doing the application
Yeah.
formally.
Yeah,
And I think we should consider, you know, the migrating as many folks to an LWAP as possible.
yeah.
May I offer one other remark here? We are going through this process because this is how we were told to do it when we had a planning consultation with the county. And they said that this was a first step for us, is to come to you guys. And then we met with Georgia and Jennifer and Molly Crone and who else was there? Anyway, the whole gang, to just find out the procedure. And this was what we were told to do, is
Okay,
to complete
right.
this application.
right, now the procedure is exactly right, that this is,
Okay.
but we're trying to decide whether we put a limit on your water meter usage going forward or not, and that's really the issue for us. The rest of
Okay.
the permits and the uses are really subject to the county supervision.
Do we
and
have
not-
any history of somebody coming forward with an application where we have declined?
To put a limit?
Yeah,
Oh,
I
yeah,
think
yeah,
we did one on Brighton Ave last year.
Sure.
It was just a sort of interior remodel,
Yeah,
electrical upgrade, so
Yeah.
basically no water use impacts.
right, just fixing it up so it's more efficient as a house to live in, but no added water, you know, fixing the roof and like you say, electrical. Let me keep going around the table.
Yeah, this is on sewer, right? This connection? It's not septic.
Yeah.
Yes. Mhm.
And the current unit that you're trying to legalize is being lived in now? That's,
For the last few months, it has not, because the tenant passed away, but for the years
Generally.
before that, it was, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
and I saw that there's a note about Section 8 housing. Is this a house or units that are kind of in perpetuity slated to be affordable housing, or could this be sold as a private residence?
No, we plan, our church owns the property. Originally, this was a manse for the pastor back a long time ago. And we intend to only use this for affordable housing. We will not be selling the property.
Would that ever transfer if it was sold, or could that be opened up?
No, a sale would not affect our ability to put
Okay.
water.
You mean the LWUP transfers with the sale?
Yeah, or just,
Yeah.
we're
Or
trying
the
to.
lack thereof.
Or lack thereof, yeah.
What do you see, Grace?
Well, these houses have both been lived in as long as I've been here. And I would anticipate that if they're putting in new fixtures, they're gonna be water efficient. Perhaps more than the ones they've got in now, so I agree, it's like always lovely to put an LWAP on, but I don't see that there's gonna be, they're not adding bathrooms, if anything, it's gonna be more efficient.
I think we
Can I
still,
just
yeah, go ahead.
say one thing, just
Sure.
in terms of her saying that somebody has not lived in that unit for a while? So that would also decrease the usage, I would imagine, like for your calculation.
yeah, well, I'm looking at that, cause between March
usage is all over
and
the
June,
place.
there's a big spread. Right?
Is there
terms of
irrigation in
usage.
there in the summer? Is there irrigation?
No, when I did ask Jennifer, I believe it was, and maybe it wasn't, but it was one of, anyway, I asked the question, and the water usage had been determined over several quarters, and I asked if the fact that our tenant had passed away a few months ago would make an impact on the monthly estimate of usage, and they said no, because they had several quarters of usage that they were banking it on, and that it was well under the allotted usage for the house. We also have a single parent with 2 children that has been living there for quite some time. And so, anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
I mean, there is something that's interesting if you look at the history between June of 2023 and June of 2022. You have a higher usage in June than you do in March of each of those years.
They,
At least.
can I say
Double.
they had a couple of leaks, so I think those higher numbers might represent a couple of times that they had some leaky pipes.
In June of.
I don't remember exactly, just
2023.
I mean, that's what it looks like. It looks like a leak.
I don't think that would be.
From 900 to 3,000.
But it's each June, I guess.
No, but it's June.
Yeah.
It's the pattern on, well,
But not the.
I can look back at that, but
yeah,
Yeah.
June 22
Yeah.
and June 23. They're both.
Yeah.
Well,
3,000.
But the rest of it's.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, my thoughts there is that, our LWAP regulations are written down with conditions on how we meet them and what are the criteria. So from an objective point of view, I don't see a basis for putting it on, although it is our policy to see how many times we can put limitations, but I don't think it can be based on just that kind of feeling. I don't really see that any of our criteria for putting a limit on it exists because other than looking at their stats here, this project doesn't produce more water usage in my thinking, even though we would like to put limits. So we have a policy and a desire on one hand, but we have standards that we ask people to meet or, I don't think that they fall within it, so.
Just because you get a building permit doesn't mean you have to be subjected to
Right, you have to show that the project is, the classic, of course, is when you take the garage or something and convert it into a bedroom. Or you take the second floor of a house and you create another, bedroom, bath or something like that. So those are easy, but if you're just gonna change the quality of your plumbing or your electricity and all of that, but not otherwise increase the use,
So you're saying the fact that they are submitting for planning approval of an ADU.
yeah.
to legalize. and they-
To legalize an existing unit
Yeah.
See,
doesn't reflect an increase in water usage. That's my thinking, but I'd like to get a consensus, we can vote on this at some point if there's.
What about, how much does the history of the property, and I'm maybe speaking more generally here than in particular for your project, but we don't know when this ADU was added. They're not adding it now, it's an existing ADU, maybe it was built illegally many years ago and they're trying just to legitimize it, but if they had waited and applied for the permit now to build the ADU, then we would be applying an LF to them, so.
If it was new,
If it was new,
If it was new,
that's what I'm saying, so we
Because
don't.
they'd be adding water.
yeah,
Right, but I'm saying they may have done it, and I'm not accusing you of anything, I'm saying they may have done it
yeah,
illegally without a permit. I don't know, I don't have that information in front of me, so,
right,
At one point, the use did increase because of the
Yes.
addition.
at some point in time.
yeah,
But,
possibly without a permit, but we
Right.
don't know.
Well, let's assume like a lot of places in Bolinas, it just started grew,
Yeah,
from a closet into an apartment or something and then a house and.
but isn't this our opportunity to?
Well, that's the question, is if it happened 35 or 40 years ago, do we then say, oh, well, now we're gonna put a limit on it because, you shouldn't have done that at that time. Generally, in my experience, we don't do that, we pretty much just look at the historical uses that we have.
Mhm.
And then, but primarily just on what is this project we want to do? And they're not asking to build an ADU, they're just asking to improve one that's already been there for a long time.
and to sort of carve it out from the house, because right now it's one house, right?
No,
They're,
it's separate.
they're separate. Okay,
Yeah,
but they're trying to license it as an ADU, sort of
And it's
separately,
one property?
but it's not an ADU now.
yeah, the church property,
No, I know exactly, yeah, sorry, I know exactly where it is, but I
Sure.
just wanna make sure, it is one property, it's got that. ADU building next to the church, okay.
But it's not
Yeah.
permitted as an ADU, is it?
well, they're probably
Well,
trying
that's
to
what they're
legalize it
trying to do.
now,
That's what I'm saying, so.
yeah,
They're
yeah,
not building it new, but they're
no,
permitting it as an ADU.
right.
Yeah.
So what they're really doing is probably bringing it up to code and legalizing it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And does that
Mhm.
qualify as an F or an LWAP? And I don't know that it does.
I don't know. Feels a little bit of a gray area to me.
It
I think
is,
it does.
yeah, okay.
That's the
What should we call it?
Yeah, I think
Go ahead.
just because it's existing use, existing footprint. We don't really wanna step in like the county would to say this is new, even if,
Mm-hmm.
like as this is an unpermitted thing that you're bringing in is permitted.
Uh-huh.
Seems a little bit out of our lane,
Uh-huh.
like you're saying, I think, so I don't think the L really applies.
Uh-huh.
I agree with you, Jack.
All right, what do you think, Grace?
Yeah, I don't look at it.
Shit.
Can
Are
I
you
just
persuaded
ask
or
a
should we
question of the
vote on
board
it?
though?
Yes.
I mean, I think you
I
guys are
think
kind
you're
of,
gonna have a.
No, I'm hearing it, I'm just wondering.
Paper, yeah.
Okay, well, let's have.
can I just ask a question of the board?
Sure.
I just wonder to what extent, I mean, you guys are kind of getting at this, but what precedent are you setting?
Well, we're not really setting a precedent at all, we're just evaluating a particular building project against our regulations that call for LWAPs when certain conditions have been
No, but
established.
I think her point's a good one, and we are setting a precedent, and maybe there is already a precedent that's been set. Which is what you're saying, you know, if we look at what was done recently, where it was voted not to. Pursue an LWAP because they weren't making any significant changes in the impact or increasing their water usage. But I guess, you know.
That's a lot.
Precedent is, you know, are we really actively wanting to convert as many users as possible to a limited water use?
Yeah, again, I agree that the principle is true, but actually, I don't think it is a precedent because in the time I've been on this board, this comes up. Periodically, you know, where people are just getting building permits to legalize units. Sometimes not even other choice, the county just writes them a letter and says, we see what you got going. And now you're gonna have to bring it up to code, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, you're in a better position, right? Obviously, because you have an existing ADU, and
Yeah.
so there is water usage associated with that. Whereas if you build the ADU,
Yeah.
then you're under the limited water use permit, and now you're having to stretch that water
Exactly,
further.
yeah,
But I still think that you're potentially setting a precedent where effectively people, it's in their interest to not seek permitting. Use
that's
the
always
water.
That's been
criticism.
Yeah,
That's an underlying criticism of the policy from the beginning, which is that it was set up that way, really. Or it encourages people not to apply for permits because then they are subject to being refused by the BPUD.
mhm.
That's why 90% of them, Bolinas have been built.
But
up
you're,
with that permit.
I'm saying that you're also seeking them to delay their permitting, right?
Yeah.
Because
that's
they
the
could just
incentive.
basically say, okay, I'm gonna build this thing, I'm gonna live in it for 3 years, I'm gonna increase my water usage over that time. Then I'll go through the form, like the, you know, the rigors of getting it formally permitted through the county and through you, anyway.
Can I,
But
yeah, can I read a sentence from resolution 655 that I
Yeah.
think is the crux of this? A limited water use permit must be applied for from the district for continued water delivery to an existing service line in which there is expansion or modification of the service which would require a county building or use permit. So,
But something is triggering a county requirement
Mhm.
for a building.
so to Kevin's point, at one point, this project would have certainly triggered a building or use permit, right? Because it's an expansion of existing,
mhm,
Yeah,
so I can see it.
yeah.
Sorry, just clarify, this is an existing ADU under the eyes of the county? Is this, or no, you're trying to legitimize this as it's a separate ADU, is that right?
We're trying to legitimize it as it's that nothing is going to change other than upgrades.
Right.
There's no structural difference, nothing, no walls changing, and Ann's gonna add something to this in just a
Yeah.
minute. It's been rented as 2 units within one house for more than 39 years. We have affirmation of that. It is just not, because at the time that it began being rented as 2 units, there was no such thing and no need for ADUs, but they didn't exist. It just never was legitimized once ADUs started being a thing. That's pretty much it. It's always been for over 39 years. It's been a house that was rented in the first part with a 3-bedroom house, and the back of the house is an apartment that was also rented. In recent months, we lost our tenant because he died. But that's the only time that I know of that it hasn't been rented. The actual structure of the building, nothing will change. We just need the okay to do it so that we can get a building permit, and we're seeking to do this in a way that is legitimate.
That's right. Anne, did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you very much. Ellen just said it. I basically wanted to clarify that it's one building. It's
Mhm.
not a house and a separate cottage. It's so in that way, it's not your typical ADU, but that's what it is basically, but it's all in the same building.
Yeah.
All right, well, we've gone around the table a couple of times, so let's see if we can get a motion to grant the application for unlimited, and if it gets seconded and carried, it does, and otherwise we'll keep going with it. Anybody want to make that motion?
So moved.
Okay,
Sorry, you moved to,
I move to grant it without an LWAP.
okay,
unlimited, yeah.
so basically no action taken. Would that be?
Well,
Yeah,
they,
reviewed and.
they've applied for a permit, and so.
And that permit is contingent on us.
Well, they applied for an LWA.
No,
approving.
limited water, an unlimited water, permit. No, we're not imposing any limits on it, that's what the motion would be.
Okay.
Right, okay. Is there a second? You want a second? If nobody seconds, then it fails for lack of
I
a
think we
second.
should talk about it.
All right, let's keep talking.
We have to decide tonight.
Well, they need to keep going with their
Yeah.
project, so I think we open the decision. All right, let's keep going.
I think just, for me, what is starting to change is that I don't think that the timeline that it's been used in this use matters for our decision. I think it certainly makes it seem more forgivable or approachable, or approvable, but the fact that, like Georgia said, if it happened 3 years ago to do something without a permit, and then you suddenly wanna legalize it or are forced to legalize it because of code compliance, then do you just have this, well, it's already existing, I kind of have changed my tone a little bit,
Oh,
my perspective on it.
okay.
And can I just say one thing? Because I think, this point that you guys brought up right at the end here is like, well, what are we even doing? Right? So my understanding when we met with them, it was, and just to be clear, it's not, having the LWAP doesn't prevent them in any way from getting the permit.
Oh, yeah.
And I just
Yeah.
want to make it clear to them, right? It's like what
Yeah.
you guys are deciding is not in any way impeding their
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
It's just around water use.
Yeah.
That's
And
right.
the fact that they came and then Jennifer told them, okay, you're gonna have to submit for an LWAP.
Yeah.
I feel like I need to represent her voice here. I
Yeah,
think she was under the impression that with formal permitting of this
Yeah.
unit, they were gonna have to submit for
right.
an LWAP, which is why it's coming before you.
Yeah,
And
Yeah.
so that's, just to kind of
all.
And
channel her
yeah,
I
voice
personally
here.
think that's the process we
Yeah.
have signed up for and agreed to, which is why I think we should approve it with an LWAP. We're not going to change their water use, looking at their history. The only thing I would say is, looking at the history is there seems to be a spike in June and consistently over the years, and I would ask them what is leading to that spike in June, so.
I-
I think we're gonna look at a historical use and a calculation and I would like to make an approval that, yes, we agree to an LWAP and come up with whatever the number is based on their historical use.
Okay. What do you think, Kevin? You're rethinking any of this?
A little bit, yeah, after what Andrew read about resolution 655, the permits for these houses, it's going from a single family home to a single family home with an ADU. Is that correct? Those are the permits. That's
The
one of the
number
permits
of people living there is going to be the same. It's
I
going to,
understand.
yeah. But it will be an ADU if we can get it permitted to be an ADU. But again, I don't know how to say it. I must not be saying this very well,
I
but
understand.
No, I think
We
you,
totally support your project too.
yeah.
Yeah,
yay.
I mean, that's kind of why, and sorry to interrupt you guys in your work, but I think it's really important to understand that this will likely have no bearing. And like Grace was saying, probably the project that you're gonna entail will mean that everything is more efficient and your tenants will not feel like they're on a limited water use permit and will have to be, you know, like controlling. It's just a more more philosophical in
Yeah.
how you guys approach LWAPs. So I just want to be clear,
Thank you.
know, that I would tell you guys not to worry about it. You can hear them discussing this and it sounds like, oh no, what is, you know, is this going to jeopardize our project? And in no way is it going to
No.
do that. And because you've had actually somebody living there the whole time, that means that the water usage has been high and that is going to be reflected in your limited water use permit. So just.
Yeah,
And
good.
if you're changing your fixtures, it's more likely that you're going to be using less water than you historically.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And I'm mildly curious myself. I have no idea what we did in June. That's crazy.
Maybe
Well, there-
install a flume device.
Maybe so, maybe so.
I think we should vote.
Okay, well, I have to have
we don't have a motion yet.
well, there was a motion, but no second.
Yeah.
So it
let's
fails.
have
to
somebody
vote.
else make a motion.
Right.
What would the limit be? Would it be 2,700 cubic feet per quarter? Is that the calculation that,
Average household usage, right?
Average house.
I think the average, we'll
Whichever
find the
is
average
higher.
is below that, so it'd be 2,700, right?
I would support that.
I mean, what you could maybe consider in this particular situation, because the tenant passed away, is to look at a window where it was being lived in fully. Just,
As a
Yeah.
measure of what the limit would be, I mean.
mhm. You know, so that you're not inadvertently limiting their water use
Yeah,
artificially.
I think they're well under that.
Yeah, I mean,
historically,
it's-
so I think back of the envelope
Yeah.
math, I think they're well under the 2,700, so I think
Yeah.
that's.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be better for them. All
Yeah.
right, well, then you want to make a motion to that effect?
I
Or
do,
somebody.
yeah, I would make a motion to approve an LWAP at 2,700 cubic feet per quarter.
Oh, okay, and is there a second? You second it? Okay, all in favor?
I,
And all opposed? Me. I don't think it's appropriate, given the.
Grace?
Okay.
What did you say, Grace?
Just-
What?
I'm abstaining.
You're abstaining.
I've never abstained.
I know,
This
it's like being
is
an
my
agnostic. Okay, so it passes 3-1 and 1. There you go. So you will get the permit that you need, and the amount of water that you're being allotted will be more than sufficient for your needs based on how you've been using it. Okay?
Thank you so much. You were all our heroes tonight.
All right, good.
Good luck, thank you. Good luck with your project.
We really appreciate.
Thank you so
the fact
much.
that You're
Thanks for
providing
your
such
support.
a housing for the town.
Thank you. We're gonna sign off and let you get on with your meeting,
All right.
but this has been a pleasure. Thank you for your
Yeah.
help.
You bet.
Bye-bye.
Okay, item 6 on our agenda. Thirsty Society, Western Monarch, count Thanksgiving 2023, New Year's 23-24, Bolinas results, presentation by Mia Monroe. Mia, I see your name on our screen. All right.
Hi, thank you for welcoming me tonight. My name is Mia Monroe. I'm a volunteer with the Xerxes Society, and I have been helping count monarch butterflies in California for 30 plus years. I helped start the Western Monarch Count that is overseen by the Xerxes Society, which means I've been visiting and monitoring the monarch butterflies in Marin, which is usually Bolinas, Stinson Beach, Muir Beach, and Fort Baker for those over 30 years. I also would like to say that especially this year, others have been observing, photographing, and witnessing the monarchs in Marin. And just like the wonderful hearsay says, all of us are reporters. However, I just retired from the National Park Service, and that's a science-based organization, and it has taught me to not only observe and witness, but also use protocol to monitor and share the data and have it available. Like many of you, I began monitoring during the heyday years when there were tens of thousands at Terrace and Purple Gate and Alder. Those were legendary times that I think helped define this community and its profound connection to nature. However, as this graph shows, there were the high year at the BPUD site in 2000 with about 1,500 monarchs observed. There was a drastic decline, and this was very, very concerning. And just like the BPUD site in 2020, where there were only 10 observed, this reflects what was happening throughout the Western monarch population, in which less than 2,000 were observed at all the sites from Mendocino to Baja. That includes the famous sites at Natural Bridges and Pacific Grove, less than 2,000. It was called an extinction vortex. So a lot of us began paying a lot more attention, and it was kind of a difficult 2021 because the rest of the state, there was a slight rebound, but not in Bolinas. We still only had 10. What was going on? In 2022, we saw some more, 432, but they didn't make it through the winter. But this year was awesome because the monarchs arrived in October, November, as we would like to say they used to do. And they were observed at 4 sites. And the site where the most were was the BPUD site. And so during the peak count, which we used to call the Thanksgiving count, there were 1,265 monarchs observed. Now, I just want you to notice one thing. I called it the peak count because one thing that's going on is we're trying to be much more sensitive and respectful. So we're looking at how we label our counts. And what we used to call till this year the Thanksgiving count was actually disrespectful and offensive to our local tribe and other tribes in the area. So we're now calling what we used to call the Thanksgiving count the peak count. And we've also added another called the early count that documents the arrival. Then we have the peak count, and then we have the late count. And that was something else that I would really like to point out was significant this year. We had the monarchs arriving as documented in what we'd now call the early count. Then we had this real high number at the BPUD site of 1,265. That's at the peak count, which was in November, December. And what that means is that for the first time in many years, we had the clues that we can call overwintering. We had significant clusters, that's monarchs hanging very close together and persisting through storms. And if the wind and the rain is bad and they're dispersed, as soon as it's sunny, moving back to the site and right before your eyes, forming clusters. So we had distinct clusters throughout the peak and into the new year. And at the late season, which would be into the new year, we still had monarchs clustering. And that was very, very significant because that forms the breeding population. They have moved inland, and already we're starting to see breeding from the ones that were in Bolinas, we think, but we don't know, in East Marin and in the East Bay. So there's some really important points here. One is they arrived, they formed clusters more than we've seen in years. The clusters persisted at BPUD, which was our largest site throughout the winter. They made it into the new year in good numbers, which is quite a high percentage, almost all of them, and they are out dispersing. So I just would like to share with you this data. That's what it is it's data at a BPUD site. And I also thank you for allowing me to share this. There's more information tucked in here, such as the different definitions of the site, what happened last year when there was a cold snap. If I have time, I'd be glad to go into that. Shall I continue and share that, or do you have questions?
Let me find out. Let's start at this end. Do you have any questions?
I have a quick question. Hi Mia, do you have any idea why the extinction vortex happened and what caused such a drastic decline in monarch numbers all up and down North America?
Well, first, your last thing you pointed out, monarch butterflies are a North American insect. That's Canada, United States, and Mexico. If you imagine the Rocky Mountains, the huge eastern population overwinters in Mexico. The much smaller western population west of the Rockies overwinters along the coast of California. Both populations are at 95% to 99% less than they were in the 1980s. Very significant decline, that extinction vortex. I also want to clarify terms because the monarch butterfly itself is not considered to be threatened with extinction. It's the phenomena of the migration and overwintering. So that's what Bolinas experiences, the migration to the coast, and the phenomena not only significant for its survival, but also something of beauty of overwintering in clusters. The Xerces Society feels like the reasons for this tremendous decline first is climate change. We have erratic weather, we have more cold winters with lots more storms, we have drought and much more prolonged hot fall into what we used to think of as winter. And so that's changing the impact on migration, breeding and nectaring sources, etc. So the first is climate change. The second is the incredible pervasive use of pesticides and their persistence in the soils. The third is loss of the overwintering sites. Almost all overwintering sites have showed significant decline in their ability to protect the monarch butterflies. The other is the loss of the breeding habitat. There's barely any milkweed out in the breeding area, which is the inland west. And then the other is that we just don't know a lot of things. So we're really stepping up the science and the efforts to understand all this.
Thank you. Question.
Yeah,
Mia, can you clarify what the term overwintering means in terms of monarchs in Bolinas? Does that mean they're spending the winter here, or are they stopping on a migration during the winter?
That's a very, very important point. Thank you. The monarchs breed in the inland west, so that could be Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Nevada, Yosemite, etc. And when the days start getting shorter and colder and darker, they go into sexual diapause, their hormones shut down, and they focus on nectaring to build up their body fat, and they undergo a directed flight, which is migration, and they come with the winds and the topography to coastal California, and they seek places that are favorable for spending the entire winter. So they arrive in November. They seek a place that will offer just the right conditions of temperature, protection from the wind, protection from the rain. It's in groves of trees that have the right architecture to protect them, and they spend all winter. So that's the significance of this data is they arrived in November. They found BCPUD and several other sites in Bolinas. They formed dense clusters and they persisted. They stayed all winter in those clusters. The sites are not in real good quality, so some of the winter winds and rain blew them out of the sites. On sunny days, you could see them flying and reforming the clusters, and they persisted through the entire winter. So they arrived in November and they were still there in January. Now, it's true, some of them may have paused and continued south, but several thousand persisted all winter in Bolinas. And once upon a time, of course, that was in the tens of thousands. But now, considering the seriously declining numbers, those couple of thousand staying all winter, November into January, is pretty good.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there anything else? I think we're just receiving this information as part of our review of the conditions on our land, right? All right.
Right, exactly. This is just data. I used to just send it to BPUD, but this year, because it was exciting news, and I had the ability to zoom in, I just thought you may want to have a chance to hear about it, plus ask me any questions.
One more.
Yeah, one more, sure.
I have one more. You just said that some of the sites in Bolinas are not good quality, I think is what I heard you say. So you've been
Right.
studying monarch sites up and down, West Marin for many years. So I'm just curious, how does the BPUD eucalyptus grove as a habitat for monarchs, how does it strike you? Is it healthy? Is it robust? And I'm not talking about the number of monarchs, but I'm just saying when you look at the habitat physically, the trees themselves, the grove, the land, how does it look to you?
Well, that's a real challenging question because the specific trees the monarchs use are at this moment in what I call a good architecture. The trees, they're there, they have branches in the right spot, and there's kind of an opening that allows the sun to come in. However, the whole grove is in seriously deteriorating condition with lots of trees that fall each year. And each time those trees fall, it contributes to more wind and cold and rain coming in. So I'm going to be really holding my breath to see if the monarchs will return next fall, because the overall condition is highly deteriorated, but the very immediate little area seems to be just right. So yeah, it's a real challenging situation. And I must say that most of the sites in Marin are similarly deteriorated. They're either losing trees or they don't protect in windy or rainy conditions or unusual weather conditions. So different Stinson Beach, for example, has a grant to improve the site. So does Fort Baker. Most of the big sites are undergoing serious efforts to transition to native trees or less invasive types of eucalyptus or improve the understory. So there's a lot of work going on to figure out how to rejuvenate these sites, as well as inland, how to plant milkweed and nectar plants, etc. So there's just a tremendous amount of attention and help for communities like Bolinas who'd like to look at what, if you think of Bolinas wide, what could be done for monarchs.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mia.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it.
And I'd like to welcome the new director, and maybe I can show you some monarchs next year.
All right, I'm
Thank
gonna
you.
move on to item 7.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is a draft of fiscal year 24-25 district budget and a draft updated 5-year capital improvement plan for 25 to 29. So we have also a draft proposition 218 notice on the proposed increases to our water and sewer service charges. And basically, anytime that we're going to raise those rates, we have to give notice to the taxpayers in advance that we intend on doing that. And that's based on the work of the finance committee. And Georgia, did you want to report on any of this, or shall we address ourselves with the draft notice?
So, I mean, I guess I can, I'm very new to this, and to be totally frank, I'm a little nervous about this item because it's very dense. And I feel like I'm presenting to people that probably know more about this than I do at this point. And I just want to thank Jennifer in recognition of the fact that I'd be presenting to you. She wrote up this really thorough and comprehensive memo that effectively, tells you guys everything I would otherwise be telling you. But I think it might be useful to just describe some of the details there to the public, who maybe haven't had the opportunity to look at this. But I don't want to necessarily, go through and read the entire document. So I would kind of defer to you as to, how you want to pull out the highlights here.
Well, the action item for the board would be to approve the draft notice for Prop 218, which is in our binder, has a date of May 3rd on it, which says the proposed annual increase for water service is $170, and that the proposed annual increase for sewer service is $168. With both of those representing 10% increases over the existing charges. So I know the members of the finance committee are here, and if there's a particular point that you'd like to make about where we got that 10% or why we need it, I'd be interested to hear sort of an explanation, because that's ultimately what we're telling the taxpayers we're gonna do.
Yeah.
And sorry to interrupt here for a second, but one of the things that, and I don't know, Belle, if you can chime in now, but just to point out a little discrepancy that Belle was discovering about the Prop 218 notice as it's written. And I asked her to just kind of relay that to you guys right
Okay.
now.
Yeah, so we kind of forgot that the county of Marin asked us to include in our Prop 218 notice the $2 charge that they add to each service charge. So each customer on the property tax bill has our annual service charges get, lumped in with the property tax bill for that total amount. And the county does that service for us, and they charge $2 per customer to do that. So they add that amount. If you look at your property tax bill, it's actually $2 more than what we have in our Prop 218 notice. And so they just said we need to kind of put some type of language in there just to let the public know that that's happening. And I know Jennifer and I discussed it at some point, but in the fray of everything, I think it got dropped. And so I just feel like we need to find some small piece of language that explains that to the customers to be included in the notice.
No, would that,
Because if you have water, sorry,
no, go ahead.
then, but not sewer, you still would be charged $2. But if you have water and sewer, you would still be charged $2. So
It's per parcel, yeah. So it's just $2, yeah.
Okay. I mean,
I was just gonna say, where would you put that in the letter?
Yeah, that's the question. I haven't quite figured out how to, if it's just a little blurb that shows up somewhere in there, or if it changes the numbers. It's a little bit, I
would
just sort of
suggest-
realized it today.
I would suggest it not change the numbers because of
Yeah.
what I was just saying. It's like if you're sewer and water, or just water, then how does it apply?
Right.
I think it's just a standalone county fee.
Talking about where-
It's quite a generous fee that they added.
Yeah.
It's not a big fee, right?
No, it's like $1,100 is the total, the charge for us, which is a plus.
But what if
But
we were to just add a sentence
Yeah,
in the
Yeah.
middle
Yeah.
of the letter?
yeah,
And that says, in addition,
yeah.
there is a $2 charge from the.
Mhm.
yeah,
Maybe on page 2, it says BCPUD account numbers 101, et cetera, et cetera. It kind of goes through
yeah,
which meters will be charged what. It's basically saying which meters have water and sewer, which have just water. I think at the end of that paragraph, you could maybe write, in addition, each parcel is charged $2 as a county.
Yeah.
service charge.
I think that might be a good place to put it.
Okay,
Yeah,
And we can just conditionally approve it. The
subject to the additional draft, yeah, right.
Okay.
But I do think they have to get this out, so we should figure out where the sentence goes. What do you think, Grace?
I'm sorry, I'm staring at the table.
Okay,
I apologize.
that's all right. We're trying to figure out where the sentence, what do you think, Kristen? You either put it in the
The
letter,
budget is adopted. Watershed service will be necessary. Well, I would just add it, can't we add it in that second paragraph, you know, inclusive of a
Yeah, sure.
standing $2. You know, service fee,
So you put it
Provided by the
earlier in the
county.
letter,
yeah,
at the end of the second paragraph.
I think so.
Okay,
Makes sense to me.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
$2 service fee. Okay, yeah, I'll
Yeah.
okay, so subject to that modification then, should we go ahead and have a motion to approve then the notice, the 218 notice?
I had a couple questions about what we're doing here. We can have a motion as long as we have more discussion though.
Yeah. No, that's fine, we can discuss
We
it
kind
before or
of
after.
need to have the discussion in order to
Yeah.
Yeah.
make a
Yeah.
motion to approve.
Oh, okay,
I appreciate the finance committees. I read through the minutes of the finance committee meetings and I felt like I
Wow.
got a nice, I could follow along, you know, after the fact, but I feel sort of caught up in what you guys did. And I feel like it was a good, robust discussion and you know, asked staff to investigate different possibilities and you've sort of settled on one and I really appreciate that. And I thought it was very logical and rational. So, I'm in favor of going along with
The
sort of
recommendation.
the recommendation. I did have a question about how we charge our customers for water. It seems like we're not raising the rates of our quarterly water charges. And I was wondering why we don't raise it at the same rate that we increase our sort of connection fees. Is there any history about that? Like, since I've been on the board, I don't think we've raised the water rates, so it just seems logical to me that if we're raising the connection rates, why not raise the fees we charge for water itself
By the
Any-
same
You
percentage.
guys,
by the same percentage? Yeah, I mean, it seems like they kind of go hand in hand, but I'd love to get kind of more historical perspective, or since I wasn't at the meeting, hear if this was discussed.
do you want me to, or Andrew, do you want to, I mean, it was discussed. I think we're all smiling because it was like one of the last things we discussed.
Okay,
And we kind of felt like we sort of, I mean, you guys can add or you can I can take over, but basically my feeling is that we sort of came to it a little bit too late in the process, but thought that we need to be more thorough in understanding why we don't do that. And maybe you guys can correct me. I think that Jennifer said the last time we'd done it was 10 years ago.
2010.
Yeah, or yeah, okay, even more.
Okay.
And so, but this, what you're bringing up is exactly, I think Kirsten had brought it up initially. And we were kind of all in agreement that it needs to be more thoroughly, you know, the rationale behind why we're putting one and not the other needs to be addressed. I do think there's a lot of, there's some precarity around putting, you know, tying your budget to service, sorry, to usage as opposed to service. That's much more obviously predictable. But I think it has to be a much more thorough discussion. But yeah.
okay.
I think she characterized it really well from my perspective, but I would let Kristen.
Yeah, I know, I think, yeah, I wouldn't disagree with how you've laid it out. I think it wasn't until we saw the proposition that it really underscored, wow, why are we not raising that now? So it felt a little bit late. And I think to your point, it's less predictable. So I think it requires a little bit more evaluation, and I don't know even if we were to be in a position to say, yes, we approve it, but it's contingent on applying the 10% to that quarterly. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Would that impact? Would that have a huge impact if we said, yes, we approve this contingent on also applying a 10%?
Well, I would
For the board
suggest that that's probably not a good idea for this fiscal year because what Jennifer presented is a balanced budget, no matter the options.
Right.
And so you basically are increasing your revenue and not having modeled that appropriately.
Okay.
And so that would probably not be a good idea, but it's definitely something that we talk about. I mean, assuming you guys are all on the finance committee, next year, that was, I got the impression that it's something that we will evaluate much earlier on in the process.
Okay,
All right.
great.
Any other questions about these numbers?
I was also curious how the commercial connection charges are determined. Is that based on usage? Is that based on like the more water use for the laundromat, for example? I'm not trying to,
Yeah.
you know, narrow in on them, but I imagine they use a lot of water. So is there a connection fee? Because I think there's a range for connection fees. Is that based on usage, do you know?
I think Belle would probably be better positioned.
Yeah, so basically we figure out the last 6 months worth of usage for each commercial property, and then there's like a surcharge associated with that. And it's a whole calculation that we have, which I can show you, which basically figures out how much their commercial within the whatever commercial range is.
And then does that transfer to the sewer as well? Basically, the more water you take, the more, I mean,
Yeah, because it's based on water use for the
Yeah.
sewer, because it's water it's going into the sewer system. So that's how it is. The sewer commercial charge is how we calculate that.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else, Kevin?
Possibly. Anybody else have anything to say?
I mean, does the 10% seem reasonable in terms of, you know, we looked at option A, option B, and then alt 1 and alt 2.
Well, I think
In
it's,
terms of maybe a hybrid of
yeah,
we're intending to go out and get some grant funding, and obviously the most extreme is alt 2, which is say we're going to fund this entirely ourselves through our through our customers, and not go out and incur any debt. And you can see it's pretty extreme in terms of the annual and
Yeah.
monthly costs if we were to go that route. But the reality is, you know, we have some big projects coming down the pipeline, and we need to start preparing for this. So this is an incremental step. Hoping that we can get some grant funding and knowing that we need to start funding it through our customers.
Yeah.
So.
And just because I feel like I want to channel Jennifer, and she was really adamant about this one point. If you guys don't mind, I'm just going to read one thing around this issue that Kirsten was talking about, which is basically staff also advises that during a recent capital improvement planning webinar hosted by the RCAC, that was the same entity that I was talking about earlier about that was helping us with grant funding. And this was a webinar that Jennifer attended. The RCAC presenter indicated that it is standard for small rural utility districts like the BCPUD to plan that 75 to 85% of its capital improvement projects cost will be funded by grants, which can be very difficult to identify and apply for. So RCA cautions against counting on them and or loan financing. And I know this is some sort of like philosophically an issue that the board has debated a lot throughout the years. And I think, yeah, it was just reassuring that we're not alone in needing to have outside funding to actually engage in these capital improvement projects. Obviously, some of that has to do with deferred maintenance, but it's also that these are really expensive infrastructure that needs to be maintained, and there hasn't been enough money to actually do it. And so
Yeah, so the extreme is alt 2, where we don't actually receive the funding that we hope to receive, and we would have to self
Fund.
And for the public, that would basically mean that the water rates would increase by $2,200 approximately, and sewer would increase by $4,600 per year.
wow.
So we're not gonna do that.
not planning on it.
Not planning on doing that, so there will
it's
be,
not our recommendation.
we'll be pursuing grants and likely taking out loans to fund some of this stuff.
Yeah.
And knowing that this is an incremental cost we're recommending now, that is probably gonna have to happen over the course of the next few years in order to fulfill the capital improvement projects that really need to happen.
Yeah, I think that it's great that we're doing the capital improvement projects. I think that if we're looking at the long-term interest of the town, there's nothing that's more important than good water and the sewer working, and you have to spend money to keep those things maintained. And grants are wonderful, and I hope that we get a lot of grant funding, but I think it's also on us to understand that you can't get something for nothing, and it's reasonable to, I think this is a reasonable rate increase, and I think that it's reasonable to assume that we'll need to do it over the course of time. Things get more expensive. But I think I think this is a very good use of taxpayer money to keep the pipes from leaking.
Yeah. All right, if there's no other discussion.
No, I just would also like to say thank you to Jennifer and Georgia and Val for completing this exercise, because I think it really brought to our attention how much of the need there is and how we want to find a happy medium for our customers today, and also a projection of what that need will be in the future. So thanks for doing the extra.
Yeah, well, I'd like to thank the committee, because I know that you guys have to dive into some cutting numbers here and sort it out and come up with some proposals that necessarily involve compromises, so it's not easy, so I appreciate that as a member of the board.
Thanks.
I generally, will defer to you guys, because I know you've spent a lot of time crunching the numbers, and when you come up with your results, and it's been thought out well in advance, so I appreciate that as well.
Yeah, and I think, to give also Andrew credit, option A felt too low, right, for where our need needs to go. And the next version up was alternate 1, and that felt too high and extreme, so we needed to find a middle ground.
Yeah.
I think Andrew really.
You can blame me.
that.
Yeah.
Oh, it wasn't a blame.
So you get the
No.
credit and the blame. One of those.
Credit.
All right, so now can we get, so now we're going to amend this draft to include that sentence that we discussed, right? That's gonna add the $2 charge. So based on that, can I get a motion then to approve the draft and so that we can get it out?
And sorry, just so I make sure I know where you want that sentence placed.
I think it was second
It,
paragraph.
Yeah.
I think it was right after the word Mesa.
Okay,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, great, yeah.
Okay. Can I just say I make that motion?
Yeah, sure. Motion.
Yes, I make a motion to approve the
Amended.
Yeah, notice to owners.
notice to owners. I thought it was a 218. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a 218 prop with the additional language in the second paragraph about the buying the county $2 service fee.
Okay, so second,
I'll second that.
there you go.
Thank you. Yeah.
Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, 5-0. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Yes,
That was a lot
yeah,
of work.
it's always the
Thanks to all.
hardest part of the whole year. Item 8, resolution 722, proposing an election to be held in jurisdiction on November the 5th, 2024, and we request the Board of Supervisors to consolidate it with whatever other elections that they're doing, and that we get election services from the Marin County Elections Department. This is something we pass every 2 years, which basically authorizes the county to run the election for us. And there
yeah,
you go.
so, again, this is not like ground that I'm super comfortable on yet, but, before Jennifer left, she explained that, and, in conversations with, the elections office at the county, that essentially, if you go to this, first page here, and where it says, and one or more ballot and or advisory measures, we were, alerted that effectively would not fly. We actually need the ballot language here. And so what we're gonna recommend, is that we, hold off on this item and we'll bring it back to you.
Okay.
And then Belle, I don't know if you have anything you want to add here.
Nope.
Officially.
Yeah.
But we're okay to wait until the month of May to approve this.
Yeah, we're
resolution?
still within, the timeline of when we need to get all of this information out. And so I would just recommend instead of, since we're gonna have to talk about this again, just
We'll
hold
just-
off on the, there's no point in kind of having it piecemeal.
All right, so put it on the next agenda.
I had one small note for your attention on this.
Yeah.
The letter from Dan Miller, he outlines what the resolution needs to say. There are 4 bullet points. And I don't know that we satisfied number 4. So I just want to make sure that gets in the resolution as well. Maybe it's in there and I don't fully understand what section 10.418 means, but do we need to explicitly say that in the resolution?
Yeah, so anyway, I'm not sure.
Okay.
But just to let you know, the same iPad former general manager has been very helpful in helping us craft what our ballot language is and other issues related to the
The resolution.
yes, the resolution and also our specific ballot measure that we need to embed within that resolution. So yeah, so basically I'll come back with all of that and obviously then it will be much more helpful because you'll actually see all of the language there related to the ballot measure.
Okay.
All right. Somebody, let's continue with that one.
I wonder if it's just boilerplate from 2 years ago, but has it changed from 2 years ago? I mean, we
Yeah,
this every 2 years.
because we want to put the appropriations limit language on there and that's the ballot. So along with our the language around election of officials.
Got it.
We have this whole other thing that we think is appropriate. Stinson and iPad do it, and we are thinking that it's that we need to also introduce that same ballot, and so we'll have to have, and that's what we're basically working out, and what we put here as a placeholder before we realized that that wasn't appropriate.
Okay.
Can I just say
Yeah.
one thing?
Yeah.
Maybe I should email Dan Miller. On page 17 of this document. My name is Andrew Green, but it should be Andrew Alexander Green.
Okay,
Could be complicated.
I think that's probably something that you need to address directly with him.
Dan.
That's all right.
He's so helpful. He's super helpful, yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
item 9, update from the ad hoc committee on the BCPUD building at 270 Elm Road in Bolinas.
Yeah, so we don't really have anything to report. We need to meet. We have, you guys can chime in, obviously. There's 2 board members here that are also on that committee. We have also been investigating the mobile unit. And I haven't been able to report back to the building committee, so I think it's more appropriate for me to bring that information to them first. And then we can present to the entire board.
Okay.
And so that would, yeah, hopefully on for next time, and hopefully we can find a time to meet.
All right.
But I think, oh yeah, Jenny did have
I
questions
just
about that.
wanted to, I have a hearsay news hat on with these questions. Because of the fact that once the demolition starts, we're gonna have to be finding a place to put the paper out. And it, from a question I'd asked several meetings ago, those mobile facilities will not include a space for us. So if we wanted to have a mobile facility, we would have to pay for that ourselves and get that. So I guess that's why I'm interested in keeping current with when demolition might start.
Maybe I can speak to that. I mean, without us having met as a committee yet, but I think what my personal view is that we're looking at having these mobile units to transfer our staff out of this building, which is deemed, basically it needs to be, I'm concerned it's not particularly healthy for our staff. And so actively suggesting that we move out of this building, without a plan yet of what this building will be. Right, and that includes demoing with no plan yet. That's gonna have to be a community decision, and that's gonna take some time. So in the interest of making sure that our staff are well housed and safe, I think it's time to get out of the building, while the community decides what this building will, what shape this building will take in its replacement. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So in terms of us needing to think about when that might be that you want to have everybody out of the building.
You're just looking for a time. Right?
Yeah,
Well,
are
I
you
mean, I
getting
think we're looking at, I can also speak from the finance, we're also planning for that for next year, so.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, so
okay.
I think,
So we don't have to jump out in the next month.
no,
No,
absolutely not, not
Okay,
in the next month.
or two. or-
Not right.
No, I don't,
She says next year.
I think we need to meet as a building committee, so I don't wanna speak out of turn.
Sure, I
But,
get it.
I can say, we are planning for it, for this mobile unit for next year.
Because I was gonna see about jumping into one of those grants for help with getting
Sure.
this,
Okay.
but I
Yeah.
didn't know whether we had to jump into it now, but go into this one.
no,
Okay.
June 30th is the
Yeah, I
end of
mean,
our
the
fiscal year, right?
fiscal year, so it'd be June.
So it'd be July 1st would be the first potential for you to jump out.
That's a good clarification, because next year sounds like 2025.
Yeah, exactly. Your fiscal year you're talking about.
Yeah,
Okay,
When,
thank you. That's good clarification. That's a big difference.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, several of the, Billina Civic Group meetings now, there's been discussion about the Matson plan for sea level rise. And the concept is to move everything from downtown up to, plan he's floating, at Mesa Park, and he has mentioned in there, about having a BPUD office there, and I thought, it's probably a good idea for this board to know that you're being mentioned at community meetings. Just because I know that one board doesn't always know what another board is talking about or doing. So I just wanted you to know that, and I wanted you to know that there are people who are looking at those plans, thinking that that's something that maybe you are privy to or know about. So I'm just here passing that information on, and if you want to address the Matson plan with Steve Matson at some point and say, you're not wanting to do that and you have no interest at all in doing that, and you continue to stay here, just FYI.
Thank you. I mean,
Okay.
I personally wasn't aware of that plan. I've heard about it, but I haven't officially seen.
But
what
you can
he's
see the
presented.
plan by going
Yeah.
to the.
And of
website.
course, we have been in dialogue with Steve.
Sure.
Conceptually about what this place could be.
Sure.
But very, very preliminary, so we will circle back with him. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, volunteer committee reports, anything on the resident permit parking plan?
no, we continue to work on that, but it's, we're sitting in a holding pattern.
Okay, and how about resource recovery?
Belle, is there anything you wanted to report on resource recovery?
No, just trying to get back into normal operations. We're taking regular green waste now, and Joe is running around crazy, but seems like things are starting to settle down a little bit down there.
You,
Could I ask Bill, while you're here, is
Yeah.
that committee ever gonna start meeting again, or are we now released? Are we just
Yeah, I mean, we've been kind of working with George and Jeff just to kind of help get our arms around the space. And we haven't really had official committee meetings yet. And I do think also you mentioned having something for Mike, an appreciation, which I've been thinking about too, trying to do maybe in the summer. So we're not quite officially back to that yet, Jenny, but I'll let you
Okay.
know as soon as that happens.
Okay, because I'm kind of feeling self-conscious about taking my committee discount at the, very excited.
Oh,
Yeah. I go in here and we're supposed to get our free drop off and
Oh,
I'm feeling kind of embarrassed to do that because we've
oh,
been meeting.
yeah, well,
I'm gonna take it
I don't know.
in.
I hadn't heard about that, but
Now,
Give it away.
now I know.
All right,
Okay,
all right.
Okay.
Land Stewardship Committee, anything? Currently not. Go on, item 11 is other business, board committees, finance. The minutes of the February 26th committee meeting and of the March 25th and of the April 1st committee meetings.
I think some of those have already been approved, is that right?
Have they?
Did
the
you guys,
finance, yeah,
you guys approve
We-
those at
we
your
approved
finance
them.
meetings?
Yep.
You mean your committee has?
yeah.
Okay, so
Um,
then we don't
And
have
was
to.
there one last
may be
one
one.
that we need to approve? That's what I thought.
I
The
believe so.
most recent one would have been
Most
April
recent one,
1st.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I
Or no,
reviewed them.
Monday.
I had no questions or comments to it, so I'm moved to approve those.
The April 1st,
Yes.
okay,
I agree. I didn't see anything. I would second that.
so you would second, okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0.
Sorry, I didn't know I was voting on that. I thought that was just the finance committee voting on that, but I also read them and I approved
Thank
the
you.
approval.
Thank you.
Okay, legal committee, I don't think we have anything. Raise the subject, flood control and roads,
Yes, we have a tentative meeting scheduled for May 3rd. 2:30,
okay,
with Kevin and myself.
very good, thank you.
I have a
Item,
topic for you guys.
okay,
For flood control and road. Should I just talk to you later?
bring it up to the committee, you mean? Okay,
Before May 3rd? Or you wanna?
Is it, I mean, is it a
Press.
pressing?
No, it's just that, I walk a lot on the Mesa and the situation, Laurel, Kale and Cherry used to be draining way better than it is. And it's just a swamp right now. It's really bad. Like, and it's not just because of the heavy rainfall. It's, I don't know if there's block culverts or what, but it's an area where there's standing water that to a much greater extent than there used to be. So I'm just wondering if there's something there that just needs to be rooted out, or if a new culvert needs to be put in somewhere, because it drains pretty well down Cherry usually. You know, I mean, you've got a slope.
yeah,
And so anyway, so
Yeah.
I notice it every day when I walk.
Thank you.
Thank you. I don't go out that way very often, so
Yeah,
yeah, good.
I will go check it out before it all dries up.
right by the White House, that area. Where are we, what area are we? Kale, Cherry, Laurel, that. And the White House being
The old
Jackie's, the old Jackie Tom. So that is a project which people have requested that to, you know, they were investigating whether they needed permits to do the work associated with that. I just informed the sort of project manager on that they don't need permits, so hopefully somebody will be attending to that.
The project manager for that big building that's going up there.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because it's bad.
Okay.
Okay.
Right,
Problem dealt with.
Yeah.
One last thing.
very good. Operations, minutes of their April 4th committee meeting.
Oh, so I think,
I don't think I saw the.
yeah, so I'm sorry because as Jennifer was leaving yesterday, we were quickly going over the agenda and in this minutes part, and we were kind of running out of time, but in my notes that I have that she wrote that those are not applicable, so I'm not sure if that meeting,
Okay,
I'm not sure if she hasn't
like those were pending, but anyways, I think that there, for some reason, there are no notes associated with that.
Okay.
And so maybe the meeting never happened, I'm not quite sure, but sorry, I'll try to figure out what's
Okay.
happening, because in some, as we go down here, she wrote pending. And then in that particular region, she wrote not applicable, so. I'm questioning what not applicable means, but.
Okay, well, if it turns out that we need to approve them, we can put them on the next agenda,
Yeah,
we'll address them. Personnel committee, I don't think we have anything.
Andrew, did we want to give an update from operations about this meeting that supposedly never happened? Or,
I don't know if it's applicable. Yeah, we met with the engineer who has done a preliminary estimate for engineering of the Canyon Road sewer connections.
oh, and I was at that meeting, so never mind, that meeting
the
happened.
meeting did happen, yeah.
So what's the upshot?
I'm guessing that the minutes are not prepared yet.
Yeah,
then. It's
yeah,
just,
okay.
I just thought we'd give the rest of the board a quick update
Yeah.
that we met with the engineer from Newt.
Yeah.
He has some numbers for a similar project that he shared with us, so we're sort of digesting those and, you know, going to share those with Canyon Road residents
Yeah,
in due time, so.
this is basically to put them all the hookups and send them up to Terrace and put them into our line up there.
That's right.
Yeah,
And that would be a charge that would ultimately be borne by the people on Canyon, is that right?
that's kind of how the origin of it was, but we're starting to maybe explore, maybe BPUD has a little bit more responsibility and there's a hookup. There's also some investigation, I think we left that we're gonna investigate what permitting is required and
Okay,
because there may be a coastal permit to do some excavation and
probably
it could
is,
be complicated.
yeah. Yeah. Well, I know that they're under a deadline too, right? The county wants to see that. See it
Project
done.
happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, then we're going on to the minutes of our own regular board meeting on February the 28th. And we also have the March 20th, but I think we only have the February 28th in the binder.
yeah, so that definitely on March 20th, I have notes that those are pending.
Okay,
And also, when I alluded to at the very beginning of the meeting, that one of the things I want to put on a future agenda item is like a broad discussion around you know, the agenda moving forward, and there's several kind of sub items to those, including what minutes look like going forward. And Bell has prepared effectively you know, minutes using the like Otter AI that I presented to you guys on before, as opposed to our kind of traditional method. But anyways, we'll have a more kind of formal presentation around that. So some of this, I mean, I think Jennifer intended to do those minutes as she's traditionally been doing them. But just to kind of let you guys know, that's, I'm like, I hope that this is a very kind of broad discussion around our agenda. And that would include minutes
good,
going forward.
thank you.
I did feel that these were done in the traditional sense, and that if they were generated by AI, that they really nailed it. They really got.
Yeah, amazing AI, right?
Totally agree.
Okay, so anybody have any changes or corrections they would like to make?
None for me.
If none, can I get a motion to approve the February 28th minutes?
I so move.
Okay,
I'll second.
thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. We also have the warrants. So I need a motion on the warrants.
I'll make a motion to, I read them, I'll make a motion to approve the warrants.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Schedule the next meeting.
CJ.
Thank you, Jen.
Bye, Jenny, thank you.
One more thing, Jack, we had a recology ad hoc meeting with, you know, our small ad hoc committee. Is it worth, anything to report from that meeting to the rest of the board?
I don't think so.
Just the word,
We just wanted more information.
yeah,
You know, we had a meeting with just you and me and
Jeff Clapp,
and Jeff Clapp
Yeah.
and Jennifer
yeah,
and
in
Georgia.
Georgia.
Yeah,
Yeah, just we're looking into the, you know, their recology request for a extraordinary one-time rate increase, so we're sort of trying to take a survey of what other
Oh,
similar
yeah.
districts along the coast are paying. So we're just
Yeah,
doing that work.
yeah, I mean, need to come back with, you know, what we think is a fair amount.
Yeah,
They want a lot, so,
yeah. So we're just
so, yeah, we're still putting those numbers together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
This is for pickup, trash pickup.
Yeah.
and things.
yeah, yeah.
Can you
Okay.
remind me, I'm sorry, Chris, I didn't think.
No, go ahead.
Just what their time frame was, when did they want that to start?
I think they wanted to start January 1st of this year, but we told them that was unrealistic
Okay.
and that we asked them for more information, and it took them a few months to get that back to us for various reasons. So now we're digesting that information and, you know, doing the survey of other districts.
Yeah.
Okay, that, I was thinking that it was last January, and when I was coming to this meeting, I was thinking,
It
we
was.
haven't talked about that for a while, and what it's going.
Yeah.
One of the subjects
Thanks
too,
for.
I was gonna say is that the county of Marin does its own franchise agreement with the garbage collection people for all of the unincorporated communities in West Marin that aren't little towns of their own, like us, right?
Mhm.
And so we were talking about, well, maybe one of the alternatives is to just stop being the franchisor or and just become part of the county's
Oh,
umbrella and let them do the negotiation. And we were gonna look into what that meant monetarily to us, you
Yeah.
know?
Because if there's no benefit to going off on our own, if it would be the same price, or if we could even get a cheaper rate going with the county, then it may behoove us to do that. So that's
Right,
another kind of avenue we're exploring.
yeah, yeah,
And that was you two plus Jeff Clapp?
Yeah,
yes,
Great.
yeah,
because I think he was at the meeting when Recology was here, and he sort of
Mhm.
expressed interest in helping
Yeah.
us. think through
Yeah.
a little bit.
Yeah.
I think the feeling is that, you know, if they're asking for this 100% increase, but a lot of it's being skimmed off or sent to the parent corporation, then we don't wanna subsidize that kind of thing,
Right.
but.
yeah.
On the other hand, we're interested in letting them make a fair profit, which is what they're entitled to under the contract, so. That's where we are on that. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, so, yeah. Okay,
Yeah, and sorry, just, I'm not seeing that on here.
what?
The Recology update,
Mhm.
yeah, I just threw it out there.
Okay, and I mean, it just, sorry, back to this whole point of the agenda, I mean, one of the things I wanna just talk about is sort of like, and I need to investigate the sort of legality of it, but is just having standing items that sit there, even if ultimately we say there's nothing to report out.
Yeah.
I see Andrew's distracted by the mice in the ceiling, but
No, but I mean, I think, can't bring things up on the agenda, but we may not be able to do a board approval, right? So you could still broach a subject and we could have it as a point of discussion, but we can't.
No action is taken. So are you
Yeah.
talking about two different
Yeah.
things? Are you talking about having agenda items that where nothing gets updated month after month after month?
yeah, I'm just
Versus-
basically, I mean, again, I think it's kind of almost, I don't mean to throw this out here and then not have the opportunity to talk about it, but essentially just kind of highlight that next time, one of the things Bella and I have been talking about is like, how do we streamline the agenda process? What are sort of the legal ramifications? Because something like this is a good example where I would prefer to have Recology kind of sitting there as, okay, we can report on it if nothing happened, then we don't have to, right? But I don't know if that's actually legally allowed. Because maybe, you know, you have to actually indicate to the public what's actually gonna be talked about, and if it's just this sort of generic long thing, then that is kind of misinforming the public about what you're actually discussing. So anyways, it's just something that Bella and I have been talking about, is like, how do we wanna modify the agenda going forward so that it's also, you know, obviously balancing, like as an informative doc, but also making our lives easier as we don't have to modify this thing every single time, leading right up to the moment of, you know, publicizing it. So anyway.
Well, like you have, you know, item 9 is a separate item, and it's just the ad hoc committee on the building, you know. So we could have an item that just is the ad hoc committee on recology requests.
Well, and that was a big question, is what are, so there's a lot of sort of like legal ramifications around what is allowed to be an ad hoc committee. You
Right.
can't just like willy-nilly create ad hoc committees for everything. And so anyway, that's, again, I need more legal counsel on what are the limitations, and then understanding those rules better, and then be like, okay, we can do this. But I don't really fully understand what we can do, so I think it's premature to suggest. because my idea would be exactly that, just have a section that says ad hoc committees, and then you would put things down there, and that way we can report on it, or, you know, and, or I can consult with that ad hoc committee. And then nice thing about the ad hoc committees, obviously, those meetings don't need to be noticed.
Right.
And so it's, you know, but obviously that means that there are legal, kind of opinions about what you can actually do. And just, so that is, again, you know, on this like broader issue of our meetings going forward.
Yeah.
Part of that kind of pool is like looking at our agenda and
Mhm.
how can we structure it in a way that is both like useful to you as a board, useful to the public, and also you know, making our lives easier as staff.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, schedule the next meeting,
May 15th,
May 15th.
that's what I've
Okay,
Um,
all right. With that, this meeting is adjourned.
got. Okay.
Thank you.
Georgia, nice job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good
See you,
job.
Val.
Thanks for coming up.
I'm going to be gone July, August, and September.